case for Rockaway, it was adopted in 1964, but a right-of-way dedication is not required, or it's only required at the time a new development is constructed. So really, it lies dormant for that considerable amount of time between its adoption and when a development may take place. And then for this particular case tonight for Rockaway, it has laid dormant for over 60 years. And as you can probably imagine, a lot may change in 60 years, and that's part of the reason we're here tonight. I'll get into that in a little more detail. I will also, kind of for the benefit of the Planning Commission, let you know that the last time the City of Hayward amended, modified, or otherwise changed a precise plan line was in 1995. So these things do not come around very often at all. And it is spelled out in detail in the municipal code, but we do come to the Planning Commission before the City Council takes action. Planning Commission is asked to basically review any proposal for its consistency effectively with the general plan and then make a recommendation to City Council. A little bit of a map for context of where we are. So Rockaway Lane is a small little street. It's 2 blocks long, really going northwest from A Street to its terminus at San Lorenzo Creek, which I have outlined in blue to kind of give some context. The precise plan line literally affects 3 parcels, 2 of which have already been developed into apartment complexes in the late 1950s. Those were built into apartment complexes. And as you look at this map, you can kind of appreciate that Rockaway Lane, 2 blocks long, really it's 1 block long before it makes a left turn onto Russell Way. And it serves a relatively small neighborhood area. So it's important to keep that in mind for context as we go forward with this. Really, the story about Rockaway Lane is not complete unless we talk about the Route 238 bypass. So State of California adopted the preferred bypass location in 1961. I couldn't find a really good map of the actual bypass, so this is taken from our Route 238 projects we're doing now for the disposition of the different parcel groups. But you can kind of get the idea of how the route bypass went from the interchange all the way down to southern Hayward. The little circle here is an approximate location of Rockaway Lane. Rockaway Lane, is part of that whole thing, was identified as a freeway off-ramp with the 1961 bypass, preferred alignment. And if you look at it, it would make an excellent off-ramp location for A Street, should there be a foothill freeway coming through. And the city obviously was well aware of this proposed bypass route and was certainly had that, I would imagine, in some context when they amended the precise plan line in 1964 to shift the entire 20-foot dedication, instead of 10 feet and 10 feet on each side of the road, to 20 feet all on the one side of the road. Now, again, important to understand Route 238 bypass. The bypass was rescinded by the state as an official route in 2010, and Caltrans began selling properties in the years after that, including 22422 Rockaway Lane. So at this point, the bypass is no more, and as we would evaluate this request, we really need to evaluate this request in the context of the Hayward 2040 general plan. And again, here's A Street. You can see Rockaway and Russell. The red color is a commercial / high density residential designation. And the brown colors towards inland on Russell are medium or high density residential designation. In the general plan, Rockaway Lane is identified as a local street. There is no plans for Rockaway for the roadway to be extended or to be expanded. There's no plans to construct a bridge across San Lorenzo Creek by any stretch of imagination. Rockaway Lane is not identified as a bike route or otherwise for enhanced pedestrian or improvements in the bike and ped master plan. So it really is a local road that serves a multifamily designation in the general plan. Couple photos, Rockaway Lane, the existing 40-foot right-of-way. Obviously, the photo on the right shows the property at 22422 Rockaway Lane. It's the undeveloped piece, and you can see the two apartment complexes. The existing right-of-way is 48 feet wide. And when you measure curb face to curb face, which is the road portion of that, it is 28 feet wide. It's a little bit older photo, maybe not the best lighting, but when there's parking on both sides of the street, the road is too narrow for two cars to pass. It's too narrow to act as a fire lane. This road does need to be widened in order to meet what would be appropriate roadway standards, and to provide safe access for fire and adequate parking. The dedication that is required with the current precise plan line is all on the east side of the roadway or the right side of the road. So that's important to keep in context. Just before this meeting, there's a request to kind of get a little bit of context. What exactly is a 68-foot right-of-way look like? And so I pulled up a couple quick examples here. Huntwood Avenue, which, on the left-hand exhibit you can see in the red, is a very long, basically, street that runs for several blocks. It is an arterial or a major collector in every definition of the word. And so it has a 68-foot right-of-way, and the measurement from face of curb to face of curb is approximately 48 feet. You can see it's a fairly wide road. There's bike lanes. The bike lanes do a couple things. One, it obviously provides access for bikes, but it also, as a secondary measure, narrows the visual width of the lane to kind of slow traffic down. You really don't need a 68-foot wide roadway for Rockaway that is one block long. For comparison, this is one block over. So Huntwood was just to the right of this. And then so Mannion Lane is immediately to the left. It's an example of a 56-foot wide roadway. We're looking at basically 36 to 38 foot face of curb to face of curb measurement, allows parking on both sides, adequate width in the middle for cars to easily pass and to function as a fire lane. I chose this location here fairly deliberately because it's vacant lot. We do have an application to develop into townhome. So this is, there's apartments on the right. There's going to be multifamily units on the left side of this road as well. So it would be more akin to what we would expect to see on Rockaway Lane. Okay. So what should Rockaway Lane be? I kind of already showed with the picture. A 56-foot wide residential street is what is recommended by staff. 68-foot wide is really unnecessary, and essentially you can consider it almost a burden to the adjoining development, particularly because the dedication is taking place entirely on one side of the street. And that shift from being 10 foot to 20 foot all on each side was done after the state had identified the 238 bypass route. So keep that in mind. We'd have plenty of room for travel lane in each direction, with parking and sidewalks on both sides, similar to what I just showed on Mannion. And it also works out that it's consistent with the existing improvements on the west side of the road. There's existing curb and gutter on the west side of the road on Rockaway, and that would line up more or less with this left curb face. And then, the road could be expanded all to the east to fit there. So one thing to put in context here, a question kind of came up, we are not necessarily giving the developer land back. It may be more proper way to think of it that we are taking less land from the developer. And I would state, and basically I think the staff's recommendation is that we'd be taking the right amount of land to meet both the traffic and circulation needs of the surrounding area and consistent with the general plan. So here's a little picture kind of showing the site, 2242 Rockaway Lane. It's important to realize this bullet point over here. Amending the precise plan line is independent of a development application on the property. This should be thought of as completely independent, regardless of what happens, whether it develops next year or 20 years from now. A little bit of context on the map. San Lorenzo Creek here is in the blue. There's an existing conservation easement recorded against the property, which is this green line here. That is was done by Caltrans as a nod, as it will, a preservation of both the creek and a creek setback area for San Lorenzo Creek. And on the left side of the drawing, the blue line is the approximate location of what a 20-foot dedication requirement would be. And the red line, the left line for Chair Arcenda, if you can't see the colors, would be the 8-foot dedication for a 56-foot right-of-way. And again, would be appropriate to the surrounding area and close to what the current right-of-way is on the adjoining property. So another thing to keep in mind is when the development would take place, the developer would be required to construct the frontage improvements for the entire property length. So they would, as part of the development, a condition of approval would be required to widen the road from the 48-foot to the 56-foot width and construct new curb gutter, new sidewalk. There would necessarily be a jog at the northern or northeastern end of the property where it butts the existing properties. But if and when those properties would ever redevelop, that would be the time that they would be obliged to make those improvements as well. With that, staff recommendation that the Planning Commission recommend City Council amend the precise plan line for Rockaway Lane from A Street to Russell Way, reduce the right-of-way width from 68 feet to 56 feet. I am available for any questions, and the applicant is also present and can answer any questions you may have of him. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wickstrom. Real quick, I want to ask and see if the applicant has any presentation or anything they'd like to share briefly before we move into commissioner questions.
No, I haven't prepared any presentation of such.
Okay. No problem. Just wanted to give you the opportunity if you did. All righty. So we can move into commissioner questions and we can jump right off. Got some hands raised already. Commissioner Lowe.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understand. It sounds like the city does not have plans to actually make that a fire lane, make it fire safe or add sidewalks or widen the road. I went by today and it's really narrow with cars parked on both sides. And it sounds like the city doesn't plan to do that ever. and we're just waiting for a developer to decide to do that. Is that correct?
I would stop short of saying that the city has no plans to ever make those improvements, but the city does have limited funds and they do have a lot of priorities throughout the entirety of the city. So yes, if funding was no option, we would make those improvements. But as it is right now, it's not on our capital project list.
Okay. And then all right, that's all I had. Thanks.
No problem. Thanks, Commissioner Lowe. Commissioner Ollie Sullivan.
Thanks very much, Chair. Two very quick questions. First, for Mr. Wickstrom, I definitely appreciate the very concise and very helpful presentation this evening. So thank you very much for that. One question, the original plan, or the original lot line specifying the 68 feet, that was based on, what was in place in the 1960s, it would sound like. Was that based on an assumption that the street would become more of a thoroughfare, or was that just sort of placing a standard width on all streets throughout the city without sort of thought as to what the actual sort of use and volume of traffic on that street would be? In the municipal code, there's a couple different sections where right-of-ways or precise plan lines are defined. There are sections where there's kind of a general I'll say shotgun approach to multiple streets throughout the city. This one, however, was very specific. It has its own municipal code section. So it was deliberately identified as a 68-foot right-of-way in 1964. And again, that is and was during the time when the state was actively pursuing the Route 238 bypass. Okay, so that was based on assumptions around the freeway. That's why it had the wider width.
Got it. I can't say that for certain, but that is certainly a reasonable assumption.
Okay, makes sense. That's very helpful. And then question for the applicant. Obviously, the applicant has requested this this adjustment. Does the determination of this lot line impact your ability to build on the property?
Yes, it does. What I'm trying to do is keep the development as far away from the creek as possible. So by adhering to this adjustment, obviously the building would become smaller and potentially closer to the creek.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Holly Sullivan. Commissioner Roche.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, are we talking just the piece from A Street to where it curves around on Russell Way? Because there's that narrow piece that goes back towards the creek where there's some houses on. Will it apply just to that first section before it turns left?
Correct. It will only apply to the first section before it turns left.
All right. Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the section you're referring to, obviously San Lorenzo Creek is kind of undercut a little bit there, and it's extremely narrow, but that is outside the limits of the precise plan as it was defined back in '64.
And was anything done to talk to the neighbors there? I mean, there's only like such a few of them. I'm just wondering if there was any input from the neighbors.
We did send out the required public notice, but we did not, I'll say, canvass or go door to door or send out direct mailers well in advance.
Okay. And the other thing I was wondering is one of those apartment complexes looks like it's condemned or not in use. Because what I'm wondering is if all three of those properties are developed and we have new development and all that, will the 56-foot width be enough if you have like a line of cars trying to get out to A Street in the morning and sometime in the future? Our determination is yes, the 56-foot would be adequate. And that's where, the example of Mannion Road, which has multifamily on both sides, would be appropriate. No matter whether it's a 68-foot right-of-way or a 56-foot right-of-way, we're really only going to have one lane in each direction on Rockaway. It's not going to become a 4-lane road, so it's not really a capacity issue at the intersection. Okay.
The 56-foot road would be adequate for the number of apartments in the entire area that, if you will, the general plan build out.
Okay. Thank you. That's all, Chair.
Thanks, Commissioner Roche. Commissioner Bonilla, we are speeding right along.
I know. I'm trying to get all of my comments in a cohesive manner. So if they're not, please forgive me. But the first thing is I do appreciate the great presentation from staff. The second thing is I've heard a lot from people in this neighborhood about the kind of traffic routes and the congestion that I think would likely occur because of this. So one of the things that, I think Commissioner Roche already mentioned is community outreach. That was certainly a part of my notes. And I think the communities might feel that we're not doing enough to appreciate the neighborhoods that they're currently in and all the traffic they're going to bring to it. I appreciate that, there's the 60-foot lane or 64-foot lane, but I'm just kind of really starting to question, as we're building all of this stuff in Hayward and everyone's concerned about traffic and everyone's concerned about their quality of life and everyone is concerned about being undercut and everyone is concerned about community outreach, how do we kind of double down on those commitments? Because if we're trying to build a community for the people that live here now, and the community feels like there's been pretty weak community outreach efforts, like that's kind of hard for me. And I also think that as we continue to build, sure, we can certainly, anticipate a lack of certain things, but at the velocity in which we're building, are we certain that we're not building impacts that may not be able to be mitigated by the city? Scott, I think those are some of my questions. We want to do all of this stuff, and I hear everybody saying, but it's so much at one time. At the end of the day, are we really sure that we're building for the quality of life? And are we really sure that we're building for the community that's here and trying to help, not just bring in new folks, but ensure we're serving the people that have brought those folks into office here today? And I think that that's a real question we need to ask about this project. I'm not against it. I'm actually for it. But I think that there's a lot of considerations that might need to be considered with more community input than I think any one of us on the commission tonight can bring to the project.
So that's a very open and wide-ranging question.
So, sorry, point of order. This isn't the comment period right now. We're in the staff question period.
Right. I heard a question in there.
So I think my question was, how are we doing community outreach to ensure that we're inclusive of everyone that's impacted, not only directly, but also peripherally by a project in which we're looking at, creating better non-vehicular, vehicular or, driving routes, but the community hasn't expressed much input into this project. And I'm not sure that they're totally for it. So I guess my question, if I was going to rephrase all of that into a more cohesive question, would be, how do we ensure that what we're proposing tonight is what the community is aligned with? Is that a better question, Chair?
I think, Scott, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I was going to say it's a very broad question. And I think really the answer lies with a broad answer, which is to say the general plan process is by definition the process that speaks to all the outreach that you're talking about, that speaks to the idea that what is the ultimate full build out and what would be the appropriate or necessary transportation networks or improvements to accommodate that ultimate build out. Certainly there is and was a substantial amount of public outreach for the general plan. And then you did also talk a little bit about pedestrian improvements. Similarly, there's the bike and ped plan that was done with a significant amount of public outreach to try to outline where bicycle improvements would need to be or where specific pedestrian corridors would need to be. But below that, and I come down to a little bit lower level here. This, is in staff's recommendation is consistent with both the general plan and the bike and ped master plan. I would, actually maybe ask Jeremy if he has some additional insights that he may be able to provide to try to answer that question.
Thanks, Scott. Oh, no, I mean, I think you did a fairly robust, and again, this is not, we're talking about project. This really isn't tied to a development project. This is tied to right-of-way widths, and right-of-way widths are really determined based on existing and projected growth. And I think what Scott had presented tonight was demonstrating that, years ago, the city anticipated a much different design, a much different transportation network than what we have today. And therefore, a lot of the land that was originally needed for those transportation improvements are no longer necessary. And so one of the things that we still maintain in terms of outreach, we still, with all actions, we would continue to do public noticing requirements. But ultimately, this is not specifically tied to a project. This growth and the roadway network was envisioned. The build out of the community was envisioned with the adoption of the general plan. And that was after a multi-year, very thorough outreach effort. So I don't know if that answers your question, Commissioner Bonilla, but that was just the network was originally envisioned much different. And I would imagine, years from now, we're going to probably see it much different as well, because we're going to start build more complete streets that accommodate multimodal, options for residents. This just does not happen to be one of those stub streets that is expected to carry, nor is it built or designed to carry a substantial amount of traffic. And as such, the amount of land that we would otherwise need to carry that traffic is not necessary. So,
Commissioner Bonilla, did that answer your question? Do you have any other questions to kind of?
I guess it did. Commissioner Okenda, I guess I did. To be honest with you, I was just wondering where was the input from the community? Because those that I've heard from would not say that the street is wide enough to carry the traffic. So I get traffic studies, and I was just going back to community input, which this project seemed to be lacking. So I was just asking how much of there it was. So I think I got my answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I appreciate it. I think that's a good topic also to expand on in discussion if folks are interested. Commissioner Ollie Sullivan, you have any, did Commissioner Stevens or Goldstein have any questions before I go back to Commissioner Ollie Sullivan? You good? Okay, Commissioner Ollie Sullivan.
Yeah, and Commissioner Bonilla, I appreciate your concerns there and what you raise as far as what you're hearing from the community. For Mr. Wickstrom, just to clarify, the street width now is not 56 feet nor the 68 feet. It's even more narrow. So theoretically, whatever happens tonight, either staying at 64 or going to 58, if I got those numbers correct, the street is still going to be wider, correct? Because it's not wide enough right now. I think we recognize that. Is that a fair assumption?
That is correct. Right now, the right-of-way is 48 feet. And so at a minimum, we would increase it by 8 feet. And if nothing happens, it would go like 20 feet. So yes, it will be widened with a proposed development.
Got it. Just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't have any questions. Some interest in discussion after we give public single public participant the opportunity to speak if they so desire. So with that, we'll close commissioner questions, move open public comment for this item. If the attendee would like to speak, there's only one attendee I see. Is this the item you are interested in speaking? Because it's the only item we are hearing tonight. The other item, I just want to be clear, has been continued for another date. So if you're here about the residential development project, that's been continued and we're not hearing that tonight. Is this the item? Okay, I see a hand raised. Denise or Amber, would you give the attendee? Okay, there we go. So you can unmute yourself and speak now.
Hi, yes. Yeah, this was the agenda item that we were just coming to listen to. We just wanted to see, we're in the community, so we just wanted to see what the impact would be for the change. And actually, as a part of the community, it actually sounds like it would be beneficial that the street would be possibly widened in the future if there was some type of development on there. So it's actually we have a positive reaction to what we heard today in the plan. That was all. We just wanted to hear the information.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.
For showing up. All right.
Excuse me.
With that, yeah, go ahead.
Excuse me. Hi. Can you give me your name, please? Speaker? I see Josh. Is that your name?
Sorry. My name is Verna Villas. My husband, Josh, is also on the call. We were just, I'm just the only one that's willing to speak right now.
And I'm sorry, can you spell your last name?
Villas, V as in Victor, ILLAS.
Thank you. And your Hayward residents?
We are business owners in the area.
Hayward business owners?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you.
Okay, thanks so much.
You're muted, Chair.
I don't see any other hands raised. So with that, I think we can close public comment and move on to commissioner discussion. I see a few hands that have gone up. Commissioner Bonilla took me here. No problem. Commissioner Goldstein, lead us off.
Thank you. Thank you. And my apologies to Ray for raising that point of order, but you definitely bring up some good points. That whole debacle with trying to make that bypass had been so hotly contested for so many years that even when I moved to Hayward in 2005, people were still railing against it. And it's just kind of surprising because that project had been, tossed around since 1961. possibly even earlier than that, because I think that's when the plan was actually made and properties had begun being purchased towards that end. So this was completely appropriate, in my opinion, to narrow the original plan for an extra wide road to be part of a freeway on-ramp, to narrow that down to standards that are appropriate for the city today, which, even though we're talking about narrowing it, is actually going to lead to a wider street at some point in the future. So I'm in favor of this, and I can fully understand why the neighbors aren't showing up here complaining about it, because either way, it's a win-win. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldstein. Commissioner Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I thought it was an excellent presentation. It really helped me to understand what was going on a lot better. I read all the materials and then I still had some questions, but you answered all my questions, so thank you. The street has been very narrow for decades, and from what I can see, if there is an increase, if a new development comes into the area, which increases the traffic on that street, presumably that new development, the new developer who's building the development will widen the street, which hopefully will help to control traffic flow. And so from what I can see, it is a gain. It's a win-win for the city and for the neighbors who live in that community. So for those reasons, I support this project. Thank you. Or not project, but you know,
yeah.
You know what I mean.
We're already in envision mode. Yeah, I hear you, Commissioner Lowe. Thank you. Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Wickstrom, for a great presentation. I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the amendment, the precise plan line. And I just have one sort of opinion, and I think outreach is a really interesting concept as it applies to general plans. You know, a general plan is a very complex concept. And I think outreach, when it relates to these things, can sometimes go to a very tailored audience. And I respect the complexity and difficulty in really outreaching to the community as a whole. And I would just mention, to me, something that's going to be really interesting as Hayward transforms and as it densifies, it will be really interesting to see how the community responds. Because I think we typically don't see how people feel about something until it happens in their backyard. So thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Stevens. Do we want to make a motion? I'm open to accepting that at this time, and we can continue discussion.
Yes, I'm prepared to make the motion to approve the precise plan line for Rockaway Lane from A Street to Russell Way, requiring reduction.
I second that motion.
Okay, I think I heard Commissioner Goldstein on the second first. So we have Commissioner Stevens moving to approve staff recommendation on this, for recommending this move forward, precise plan line change, and then Commissioner Goldstein with the second. And then with that, I think we'll hold the motion on the side, finish our discussion, and then get to it in a second. Okay. So Commissioner Bonilla.
Thank you, Chair Kenda. So I am totally for widening things and getting people walking and biking and everything else, but not in lack of not having a regional plan to be able to get people out of their cars. You know, we don't have a plan regionally to figure out how BART and buses and everything else is all connected to widen lanes and make things more safe for people to do stuff. So I came into this meeting actually in a lot of support of this project. And as I thought about myself as being a member of the Hayward community, actually figuring out how to get out of a car, it's not working for me. It's just not. So I totally appreciate everyone's, eagerness to vote on widening things and getting people out of cars. But I think that we need to look at this in a very regional type of way. When people are living in Hayward is heart of the Bay, which is what we're selling it to be. San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, everything should be accessible, and we should be able to get home safely. The idea of us getting in cars, even on this particular, project that we're voting on now, it's very interesting. And I think that as we all start to think and hear from the community, or maybe the lack thereof, we should all remember that we're here to not represent our own views, but those that live in Hayward and that have to deal with the decisions that this particular body makes. So I'm very interested in hearing what other commissioners have to say about this project, but I think that it's hard for me to look at this without an integrated TDM plan or without a regional plan to figure out how we get people out of cars. Transportation management is something that's very important to the region, and we're all looking at independently, very similarly to the way that we're doing housing and other issues. There's coalitions and opportunities for us to look at this in more of an integrated way, because at the end of the day, Hayward isn't solving this on their own. And I hope that we're able to do that with input from the community before we make broad decisions that create lifelong impacts on people that we may not be hearing from. Those were my only comments tonight. Thank you, Chair Okenda.
Thanks, Commissioner Bonilla. I just wanted to jump in and make a few comments really quickly. Sorry to jump. I know you guys have your hands raised, but I was just thinking about what Commissioner Bonilla was saying, and thinking a little bit about our regional coordination that's really been trying to take off here with the merging of ABAG and MTC, and how Hayward's fitting into our, meeting our transportation climate needs in addition to housing. I think, we're not discussing a project here yet. My hope is that there is one soon in the future, but I could see, this conversation being really significant whenever a project comes up, multifamily project comes up for that space. I drive past that location all the time on right there on the corner of A and I almost wanted to say Rockefeller Way. No, the Rockaway Lane or Drive. And I think for me, there's, as it stands transportation wise, it's really ton of access at that location to bus routes, and obviously fairly close to BART. A lot of the buses come down A Street, come down B Street. I think there is, pretty good space there. I do think, just in my, with what we're really talking about here, in this kind of limited focus on the precise plan line, I only see a benefit here. I see a win-win for the city, as some other commissioners have said. I think, expanding the opportunity to widen the street while still allowing the developer to capture the value of the land that exists right now for development, that difference between the 68 foot and the 56 feet. To me, especially if we're considering, reducing setback requirements and a whole host of other things that might be coming up into play in a development like that, just wild speculation, we could really see some good high density residential development there that's connected real close to Foothill, to downtown Hayward. So all that to say, I just see this as a really good first step to kind of getting us to the place that we want to be. I think with that, I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry for interjecting. But Commissioner Roche, your comments.
Well, I think your points were well made, Chair Okenda. I don't disagree with them, just to make sure that we're not in disagreement publicly. I think my point is there's a need for a more integrated approach here. I think we're doing things in a very fragmented way, and the only way to reach the inspirational point that you're approving is to do it in an integrated way, and I don't see it, but I hope you do.
I do. I definitely understand where you're coming from. Thanks, Commissioner Bonilla. I always appreciate your comments, always. Commissioner Roche.
Thank you, Chair. I feel like, widening the street seems to be an obvious decision. Even the neighbor, it's nice to hear from one of the neighbors tonight because I think sometimes when we don't hear from people, especially when we're in a pretty intimate space and it's going to affect, a few residents, it's really nice to hear from somebody. So thank you for calling in. And I don't see this isn't an arterial level road like Huntwood. So I can see the 56-foot width seems to be appropriate. But, the point about community interest and alerting people, I think in some of these situations, canvassing might be a really good idea. I mean, I know it's hard with the staff time and maybe we don't have the resources to do that, but it reminds me of the Barry project that we approved as well. There were about 4 or 5 houses that were going to be directly affected by that project. And I would have liked to have seen maybe those 4 houses be sort of, like the doors knocked on for that project. But otherwise, I feel like this is a pretty sort of like benign ask, yes, we widen it and it's going to be better for the neighbors. But I really appreciate the broader perspective from Commissioner Bonilla tonight, because it's true, we talk a lot about sort of what the future is going to look like, but we need to be building that infrastructure to get people out of cars with some real and very convenient options, for people to not want to use their cars. So I totally support looking at regional efforts going forward. And I appreciate you finding the time to bring that conversation in tonight, Commissioner Bonilla. But otherwise, I am in support of this, of the recommendation tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Roche. Commissioner Ollie Sullivan.
Thanks, Chair. I'm in support of this project. I'm marginally confused on some of the discussion this evening. And I think really to put it into perspective, what we're looking at here is to approve this will reduce what the road otherwise will be. So the alternative is if we're not in support of this, then we end up with a 68-foot road for the first half a block of the street that the city has clearly identified as basically overkill for what is going to be developed or could be developed or what should be in a similar or like-mannered area. You have a 68-foot road for half a block, and then it narrows down to 40 feet, the rest half a block down. And so arguably a 68-foot road is more pavement that has to be maintained by the city that costs more money. And so all in all, I'm struggling how, given the two choices, we would not be supportive of this plan that creates a calmer street with arguably slower traffic, with arguably less cost for the city going forward, with arguably more chance for development on the land as opposed to an open lot. And so I'm very supportive of the project. To Commissioner Bonilla's point around sort of comprehensive strategy, I think what might be helpful and for city staff here and Jeremy, my understanding is that indeed the city is looking at these comprehensive transportation management programs, and it is working with organizations like ABAG and with regional transit agencies. And so if those plans and studies do exist, as much as it's been a while since we've seen some of them, I would greatly appreciate perhaps even just a recirculation of that to really give us a sense of, well, what is Hayward's comprehensive plan for integrated traffic and transportation management, just for our edification here and knowledge of what's going on, because I think these projects are coming up and we're having questions about how they integrate into the bigger plan. And so whatever documentation or programs are already in place to refresh us could and would be helpful, and I would appreciate that. But aside from that, supportive of the project, I think is an extremely light lift. So, yep.
Thanks, Commissioner Ollie Sullivan. I always appreciate the discussion with the commissioners. I love you all. It's a great conversation. I'm definitely looking forward to how this might turn into a wonderful project in the future. So with all that, I don't see any other hands up on the discussion here. And I think we can just move to vote on the motion that's currently on the floor. That is a motion to approve staff recommendations to recommend this precise plan line change made by Commissioner Stevens, seconded by Commissioner Goldstein. Can we get Secretary Chan to moderate the vote count, the roll call
Yes,
vote?
right here. Mm-hmm. Okay, Commissioner Ollie. Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Ollie Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Bonilla.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldstein.
Aye.
Commissioner Lowe.
Aye.
Commissioner Roche?
Aye.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Chair Okenda?
Yes.
Thank you. 7 ayes.
All right, 7 ayes, motion passes, and that's this item. So we can skip the second agenda item here because it has been continued and will be re-noticed appropriately for whenever that date's going to be set for that. And we can move to the last agenda item, which is the minutes, approval of the minutes. We have any motions on the floor to do that?
I'll move.
All right.
Second.
Great. We have a motion to approve the minutes by Commissioner Bonilla, seconded by Commissioner Lowe. Can we do a roll call vote, please? Secretary Chan.
Thank you. That was Commissioner Bonilla. And
yep, and Commissioner Lowe with the second.
Thank you. All right. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Bonilla.
Aye. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldstein.
Aye.
Commissioner Lowe.
Aye.
Commissioner Roche.
Aye.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yes.
Chair Okenda.
Yes.
Thank you. 7 ayes.
All right. We've passed the minutes. That was a nail biter. Next, we have commissioner reports, staff reports and announcements. We'll start with the staff first. Jeremy.
Good evening, commissioners. So I wanted to give everyone kind of a heads up of an invite that will be sent out to you. The Alameda Collective is holding a decision maker training, and it's intended for all appointed and elected officials in Alameda County around the housing element and housing related policies and programs. The training, which is tentatively scheduled for Friday, March 25th, will provide background and general information on real estate and development feasibility in the Bay Area, and will also cover markets and levers to impact development of all housing levels of affordability, including those things that could impact development, such as parking, zoning, impact fees, inclusionary housing requirements, et cetera. There's going to be a panel of experts that's going to speak on these topic areas, representing a variety of disciplines, and they will also be available to answer any questions. So wanted to give the commissioners kind of heads up. The time is still to be determined, but right now it is tentatively scheduled for Friday, March 25th. And acting principal planner Leah Schmidt, who is heading up our housing element update, will be sending out an invite to those commissioners if you would like to participate in that training. But again, it's Friday in March.
Thank you for that, Jeremy. Does that so that is, we don't have to ask for the invitation. It's just going to be sent to us, and we'll kind of figure our schedule if we want to go when it's appropriate.
That's correct. It's more of kind of a save the date type of thing.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much. Any commissioner reports or announcements? Commissioner Bonilla.
Thank you so much, Zachariah. I just wanted, Chair Okenda. I just wanted to say happy Black History Month to everybody. This is a very important month for us to all just reflect on the wonderful contributions that have been made by African Americans in the history of this country and in this world. That's what I had to say. I hope we're all able to get out to celebrate, to recognize, and to be a part of what we've been made better by the contributions of African Americans in this world. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Commissioner Bonilla. Commissioner Roche.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Bonilla, for that. I also wanted to remind everyone that the Environmental Justice Community Workshop is coming up in February, and February 23rd, and I believe you can find that information on the Hayward website. I think it's at 6:30 on February 23rd. So just want to remind everyone to take a look at that. Thank you, Chair. You're muted. You're muted, Zachary.
Ton of interest in that, so I appreciate you sharing that, and I know that a lot of commissioners were interested in participating in that, so I'm glad that they opened up to the broader community to hear us out. All right, well, with that, it looks like there's nothing else on the agenda, nothing else to do. We can all just hang out here if we want, or we can
Happy Valentine's Day to everybody.
Oh, yeah, happy Valentine's Day.
Your heart and your love, and celebrate all the, people of color that have done wonderful things for this country. All right, back to you.
It's a lot of love this month for sure. Valentine's Day, just fun fact, is the day that I met my wife like 8 years ago. So it's a special little anniversary for me. All right, well, with that, we can adjourn. Don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And look forward to seeing you all soon.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.